Hello and welcome to it. This is Hashtag Africa. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be taking a comprehensive look at some of the stories that dominated headlines across the continent. I'm Tutuzile Ramela. We begin in Nigeria. The country has declared a national disaster following the death of more than 100 people in floods. Flooding tends to occur every year in the rainy season, exacerbated by poor infrastructure and a lack of planning. But this year's destruction is the worst since 2012. A national disaster has been declared in 4 states. The federal government has taken over the search and rescue as well as the rehabilitation of victims there. In nearby Sierra Leone, floods killed 400 people last year. Staying on the West African coast, Liberia has lost a container filled with, get this, a whopping $100 million in banknotes. Now, this prompted authorities to bar 15 people, including the son of former President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, from leaving the country. The missing amount is the equivalent of nearly 5% of the country's GDP. Investigators say the notes were ordered when Sirleaf was still in power, before President George Weah took over this year. Liberia doesn't have its own mint, and the central bank is the only body with the power to order new currency. Staying with money matters, the United Kingdom and Finland have frozen millions in aid to Zambia following allegations of corruption in that country. There are suspicions that almost $4 million channeled into a social welfare scheme may have been misused. The scheme is a donor-supported program under which the government relays money to vulnerable households in rural areas. A political analyst says the withdrawal of the funding will hurt the poor and comes at a time when Lusaka is struggling to manage its debt. So what is the true cost of corruption in Africa? The Liberian government is still none the wiser as to the location of a shipping container with $100 million inside. A number of countries on the continent feature high on the Corruption Perception Index. Now, corruption permeates society and is felt by the ordinary African on the ground. Let's expand on this. I'm joined in studio by political risk analyst Sinethemba Zonke from Zonke Media. Thank you very much for joining us. When we take a look at the Zambian situation, does the punishment fit the crime here?
I think it's difficult to say, because at the end of the day, as you said, the people who get hurt the most are the ordinary Zambians who are not involved in the program. But what donors want to do is to send a signal, particularly to their own citizens that are accountable for who pay the taxes that fund foreign countries. So that is the signal that is being sent.
Right, sending a signal to their own citizens, but are they also trying to send a signal to other leaders on the continent to say, hey, perhaps it's time for a wake-up call. If we can do this to Zambia, we can do it to other countries?
I mean, indeed, I think it's part of international relations and geopolitics. A lot of times there's a whole lot of talk by particularly the developed countries about corruption in Africa and whether to end it or not. But again, you might question that certain countries who might be doing things that are even worse than Zambia, and funding is not being pulled off, especially if you counter whether corruption versus the lack of democracies in some countries. Some countries continue to get funding while there's still lack of democracy. So it is kind of a catchy situation in terms of how donors decide to pull aid or continue to fund countries.
I mean, the situation in Liberia gives any heist movie a run for its money. It's even hard to fathom how $100 million can go missing. Will this actually act as a deterrent to leaders on the continent? I
think what we're seeing is just, I mean, it's our own shock to see an actual story highlighting the amount of corruption, as you say, in the heist. But there's billions of dollars that are coming out of Africa in terms of illicit financial flows. Some of it is through means such as this, where it's hard, cold cash that is going offshore to other countries. Africa is sometimes described as actually as a donor itself to the world in terms of the amount of money that's going out of the continent.
Zambia specifically, Edgar Lungu has decided to sack a minister, but surely that's not enough. It can't be only on one person.
Indeed, I think the president needed to show face, needed to show a strong role that he is acting on the situation. He's also asked the Secretary of Cabinet, Roland Msika, to start an investigation within the next week. The minister was a sacrificial lamb for this, but there are definitely a lot of other people, particularly below, in terms of the infrastructure of the social program. I've heard reports that the ZAM Post, the Zambian postal system, which was supposed to do the actual delivery of the funds to the poor, might also be a key actor that needs to be looked at.
Sure. Malawi is also a funding-dependent country. Should they be looking at what is going on in Zambia and taking notes?
I think Malawi itself has already been through what's going on in Zambia 3 years ago, when there was a massive issue with the former president, Joyce Banda, where there's a lot of, particularly Britain again, which is a major donor of the country, pulled a lot of funds. Malawi has tried to reform since then, speaking to multilateral institutions such as the IMF, which has wanted the government to do a better financial restructuring. So Malawi has been watching this. Interestingly, last year there was a scandal that involved Zambia and Malawi with regards to maize between the two countries, and Zambia and Malawi actually did a massive work in terms of acting against the agricultural minister and a number of actors who were actually involved. So Malawi has done a lot of work in actually ensuring that people who are involved in corruption are actually sent to jail. It's interesting for that country, as you speak about it, they're heading to the elections next year, so they also need to make sure that they look at such things.
We actually very much welcome reform when something has been identified, but everyone keeps saying that corruption is not exclusive to the African continent. Yes, it is not, but then it hits us the most, and we take it very much personally when you see the impact on the ground, when nothing is moving, not infrastructure, not anything otherwise.
Indeed, I think that's the thing. I mean, corruption amongst less developed nations has a much wider impact. I think it really drags countries back. And it's not simply just, a lot of times, just the money itself. It's just what happens in terms of the ethos of a nation, in terms of the attitude that the people have towards a nation. As when services are not being delivered to people, a lot of times it's because of corruption, because there's no money, there's no funding to be able to make programs move forward.
Thank you very much for joining us in studio, political risk analyst Netemba Zonke from Zonke Media. A great pleasure chatting to you. Do stay with us after the break. South Africans are on a high following an interesting constitutional court ruling. Hello again. Let's head to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where health workers are racing to curb the spread of the Ebola virus by using an experimental vaccine. The new treatment allows for relatives to visit and speak to patients without having to wear protective suits.
Health workers in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have rolled out an experimental vaccine to help curb the outbreak of Ebola. The virus has so far killed 90 people since July. The new treatment isolates patients in futuristic cube-shaped mobile units with transparent walls and gloved access. This allows health workers to treat patients without having to wear cumbersome protective gear. Esperance Nzavaki is one of the patients who have benefited from this new treatment. She was cured after just 3 weeks of cutting-edge care.
I was in contact with someone who had the Ebola virus, and after a few days, I started feeling unwell, and I started developing Ebola symptoms. I had intense pains, a very high fever and fatigue. I also had pain throughout my body. I thought I had malaria or typhoid, so I went to get some medicine at the pharmacy, but I was still feeling sick after 2 days.
Relatives and other visitors don't have to wear protective suits to speak to patients through plastic sheeting around the cubicle. Kasereka Mundala, whose wife has been receiving treatment, praised the doctors for saving her life. She contracted the virus while washing the body of a relative who'd passed away from Ebola.
It's been a week and a half since my wife has been ill and is being treated here. I am very happy that she is progressing well, and I thank the doctors and I praise God.
Health officials say they've made progress in slowing the virus's spread. But they can't be sure the situation is under control because some areas are difficult to reach.
In Money Matters, Nigeria's central bank says it's working tirelessly to resolve matters with MTN. The two have been at loggerheads following an order that the telecoms company return more than $8 billion in dividends.
It's a scandal that sent MTN shares plummeting and jitters through the markets. But now Nigeria's central bank is reviewing information provided by MTN and 4 banks accused of helping the company to illegally repatriate billions of dollars. Nigeria is MTN's biggest market, accounting for a third of annual core profit, but this has proved problematic. In recent years, there have been multiple allegations of violations. The central bank hit the company with the dividends shocker, and 4 banks were fined for their role in the matter. The MTN share price fell nearly a third in Johannesburg in the days after the announcement. It's still not clear what an equitable solution would entail. It's not the first time the company has been in trouble with Nigerian authorities. In 2015, it incurred the wrath of the Nigerian Communications Commission and was slapped with an unprecedented fine of more than 1 trillion naira. The fine was related to alleged violations the company committed on SIM card registrations.
And of course, social media has been abuzz this past week. Let's take a look at some of those stories that trended. Social media users are on a high. That's after the Constitutional Court okayed the private use of marijuana in South Africa. While smoking it in your home won't get you into trouble, selling it to others remains illegal. Government has 24 months to officially write the ruling into law. Amnesty International says 400 civilians have been killed in Cameroon's 2 English-speaking regions this year. Attacks between armed separatists and security forces continue to escalate, and no one is safe. People in the regions have complained for years about being marginalized by the largely francophone government. Tensions spilled over last year after protests in the Anglophone regions turned violent. And Ugandan opposition MP and one of President Yoweri Museveni's fiercest critics, Bobi Wine, headed home this week. He was in the United States for treatment after what he called torture at the hands of Ugandan security forces. Police made it clear that only relatives would be allowed to meet and collect him from the airport. All welcome home gatherings have been banned. And that brings us to the end of this week's show. Do stay tuned to EMCA for all the latest news. Take care and goodbye.